How about imagining that there would be a country where you would have a situation in which people no longer could go to a doctor when they wanted to? Now we see this. We know what's coming down the pipeline. Do you want to be able to choose which doctor does a knee replacement or a shoulder replacement, or do you want to be put out on a line and waiting list so that the government can choose which surgeon does it because he does more of them in a day than somebody else does and is more efficient? This is what is in line already in England and in Canada, and the waiting lists are long just for that. That's why we have people coming from there to here to get medical treatment. Why do you think the King of Jordan for so many years came to the Mayo Hospital? It's because Minnesota in particular has some of the best health care in the nation. And this nation shines in health care. People come here. Now I know that all of us have had issues with waiting for the doctor. It would be nice to be able to submit a bill to the doctor for the time that we wait in the waiting room. But nonetheless, we can still go when we choose. We can still call them up and usually get an appointment the same day rather than having to wait for months for something. Imagine a situation where the government comes in, like in Venezuela, and decides that, no, you can't have your natural resources. We are going to now own the national resources. When Hugo Chavez did this, the United States and many of its citizens got up and said, no, this is wrong. This is nationalizing. This is socialism, and they shouldn't do that. Look, he's bad. He's a dictator. When Juan Perón did this from 1948 and on in Argentina, he seized the national banks, the largest banks, made them obedient to the state. Then, through those banks, he bought major industries throughout Argentina. Now this is starting to sound familiar, isn't it? This same thing has happened. My own insurance company, AIG, where is that now? Fannie and Freddie, my wife and I got our first home through a Fannie and Freddie loan. And if I had known and understood what was taking place behind the scenes, where that money was really going, well, we can't change the past. But we can certainly see who has been pulling the purse strings on these, and they need to be held accountable. Because wherever there is socialism or fascism, there is corruption. And you have to understand this about socialism. Socialism does not produce anything. It never has. Socialism takes from producers and seeks to redistribute it. And in order to do this, it gets people mad and tries to blame somebody. This is the pattern in Russia. This is the pattern in Germany after the Weimar Republic fell. This is the pattern down in Cambodia for Pol Pot. All these countries blamed the prosperous bankers. They blamed capitalism. And they made the citizenry mad at these groups, and they took away from the citizens their own ability to have private property, and this is where gun control comes in. Because gun control is another type of denial of private property, but it's not just that, it's the denial of a person to defend himself, herself, or their family, or those around them. Gun control began in the United States back in 1934. There was an act that was passed by the Congress called the National Firearms Act, and it was designed to discourage the purchase of automatic weapons by gangsters. Now, it didn't make automatic weapons illegal. It proposed a $200 tax per purchase, and the fact that those weapons had to be registered. The idea, you can guess it, let's get the guns out of the hands of the bad guys. Who really lost the ability to own those weapons? Was it the bad guys? No. It was the everyday citizens. That law was enforced and expanded upon in the Federal Firearms Act of 1938 that required sellers and gunsmiths to be licensed to sell firearms or to repair them. And it also sought to keep guns out of the hands of criminals by requiring all gun sales to be recorded and all ammunition sales to be recorded. Now, parts of this were repealed under Ronald Reagan, but even in that repealing, further gun control acts were made that restricted further the citizens' ability to acquire firearms for themselves. Already in the United States, from its start, the advocates of gun control have used the argument that such gun control laws were necessary in getting guns out of the hands of the bad guys and in protecting innocent victims of crime. Now, you can carry a handgun on your own property or in your place of business without having to have a license. But the very fact that you have to have a license is something that is an infringement on your ability to keep and bear arms. Do you remember that language, where it comes from? That is the Second Amendment.
Yes.
And in that Second Amendment, the founders of the country wanted to keep the people from ever being infringed upon those rights. Now, that's not just a handgun, that's any kind of gun. That's any kind of knife, any kind of sword, whatever weapon that you can have, even a hammer. Did you know that in England right now there are knife control laws? They got rid of guns a long time ago. The only ones that are there are the ones that people either haven't reported or that people have as heirlooms with a special license from the government, or the ones that criminals have. And it's the ones that criminals have that are being used. Now they're trying to get rid of knives, which means if you walk down the street in the streets of England, going from your grocery store, buying a knife off the shelf, you have to carry it in a special package so it cannot be accessed by you or your person or anybody among you, so that nobody can use it in a slashing, because they've had a large number of these. If there's no guns in the hands of people who are criminals, what are they going to use? The next most deadly weapon. And they will keep using it. Because it's not the guns that are the problem, it's the people, and it always has been the people. Benjamin Franklin wrote that if anyone gives up an essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety, he deserves neither liberty nor safety. The Federal Gun Control Act of 1968 introduced the notion of sporting arms. The Act says that it prohibits the import of firearms with no sporting purpose, and it implemented a registration system for all purchases via a form numbered 4473. Scott, that's the same form we use now, isn't it? That's the same form that we use now. What this means is that for every purchase there is already a registration of the firearm. Now I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about registration in that in just a minute. And I don't know how much time I'm supposed to have. Another 10 minutes, right? Okay, good. Good. But it also prohibited the sale of certain kinds of weapons, including imported small handguns, which were labeled Saturday Night Specials. Unfortunately, most of the Saturday Night Specials were made by Jennings Corporation, or Jenner Corporation. Remember Bruce Jenner?
Yes.
He was in charge of this gun company, and he made them in the United States. These were the ones that were called the Saturday Night Specials. They were usually 25 or 32 caliber. Gangs liked them, but so do people who like to defend themselves. In this this Federal Gun Control Act was passed in 1968. And the emotion that was used to pass this, like the emotion in 1934 and 1938, was, oh, the bad crime. And this particular crime was very bad. It was the assassination of the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. But the Firearm Act had nothing to do with a bolt-action Italian rifle. The law that they passed in his memory had nothing to do with the kind of firearm used in his assassination. Rather, that assassination was used as an excuse to prevent citizens from getting their hands on weapons. Now, there's a lot more legislation that we can talk about, and it's important for us to go through those things and learn them on our own. And those things are available. For example, there's a book up, I don't remember the author, but it's called The United Nations Wants Your Guns. It goes through the different laws that the United Nations has enacted with their gun control acts in order to ensure that all of the member nations do not have guns in the possession, particularly handguns, in the possession of local citizens. Included with that are any semi-automatic gun, whether long arm or short, and also any slide action or pump action gun, like our shotguns for hunting. There was the promise, we're not going to be taking your guns made by somebody this past election cycle. Do you remember who that was?
Obama.
They're not going to take my Beretta, he said. Vice President Joe Biden. And then we had the seizure down in New Orleans just before that. But now we have these so-called gun-free zones. How many of you are aware of gun-free zones? How many of these do we have in town here? The hospital I know is one. Over here, the school, of course. Yeah, there's the 1,000-foot law, too, with that. Now, what's the problem with these? I'm sure all of you realize this, but I'm going to read just a few gun-free zones that have come into prominence lately. April 20th, 1999, Columbine High School, Littleton, Colorado. 14 dead, including the shooter. 23 wounded. A gun-free zone. Cold Spring, Minnesota, September 24th, 2003, Rocori High School. 2 students killed by John Jason McLaughlin. September 24th. Very close to where I live. March 21st, 2005, Red Lake High School. Red Lake, Minnesota. Trolley Square Mall, Salt Lake City, Utah, February 12th, 2007, 6 dead, including the shooter, and 4 wounded. But what you didn't hear in the mainstream media was that there was a cop from Ogden, Utah that was there, and he carried his gun concealed against the policy of the mall that was printed on the door, and he held that gunman at bay so that gunman could not shoot more people. Virginia Tech, Blacksburg, Virginia, April 16, 2007, 33 dead, including the shooter, and 15 wounded, a gun-free zone. Tinley Park, Illinois, February 2nd, 2008, 5 dead, a gun-free zone. Kirkwood City Council, Missouri, Kirkwood, Missouri, USA, February 7th, 2008, 6 dead, including the shooter, and 2 wounded. Since 1966, there have been almost 200 people killed in school shootings, which were all gun-free zones. And this is not including the Tinley Mall shooting or any of the shootings that have been done in other public places. See, I'm still a little bit nervous about this, because this is my first political speech. I speak in front of people all the time as a pastor, but now I'm talking politically, and that's different somehow. The gun-free zones didn't make the front page as gun-free zones in these shootings. That was hushed up. We didn't hear that the nursing home in North Carolina was a gun-free zone, but it was. But something else that we don't hear about is the 850,000 to 2 million times a year that a person armed with a handgun in the United States defends himself or his family under the law and saves lives.